Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Body Tune Live. I have Jacqueline, our office assistant here. If you've been to treatment here, she's probably helped you out using some of our modalities or showing some exercises. So today she's just going to join us for the class to help get some more energy into the room. So today we're going to do a breathing class, and we're going to try to focus on the effortlessness of breathing. I wrote a short description about the importance of making the breath light and easy for reducing stress around the neck. A lot of the muscles that attach from the cervical spine run down underneath the collarbone to the first rib. That's way up here. And we're going to explore how that feels so we can know what we're actually trying to target with the relaxation today. But at the baseline, you need to understand that the less labored your breathing is, the less stress your neck and mind are going to be. Okay? So let's get started with a quick experiment here. I'm going to just take a baseline look inside of our body and try to monitor our breathing and just kind of feel where it's taking place. We don't need to change anything yet. This is a baseline experiment so that at the end of the session we can repeat this and see, yes, naturally my breath has changed. It's different from when I started. Okay? So baseline, we'll just take 30 seconds silence here and we just try to evaluate how we're breathing right now. Great, so my breathing is particularly small at the moment and it's activated somewhere around here. I feel most of the stuff going on. Okay, so let's do a second experiment where we start to understand the importance of the neck and how breathing can affect our neck. Okay, so here we're going to take the bigger heaving breaths into the chest. You don't need to arch the back or do anything funny like this. You just take a really, really full breath, okay? And while you do this, you're going to take the hands and you're going to put them like you're strangling yourself, where you can come in from both sides and feel the muscles along the side of the neck, okay? So as we breathe out, you can feel the side of the neck muscles getting softer. And as we take a big, big breath in and hold the breath open at the top, you can feel how the muscles around the side of the neck become firm as they continue to try to lift the ribs up. And now as we breathe out, we feel the muscles relax again as the upper ribs come down. Okay, let's try that again and notice how aggressively the neck muscles actually tense up. Quite a bit of activation there that I really don't want in my life, to be honest. So the other aspect of recalibrating the lungs and respiratory system to get away from this is that it's not about the volume of air that we breathe in. If we take a big volume, we'll run out here, and we'll be forced to feel the neck tense up. But perhaps even without feeling any of the lower parts of the lung, we can also learn to breathe into the neck right now. So try to breathe only into the top of the ribs. And we just take the shallowest, most stressful looking breath you can imagine. You're going to feel the neck really tense up as you pull in. Maybe even the head pulls back a little bit. Right, you might even notice the tongue and throat getting tense. And as we bring the awareness down into the lower abdomen while we take that stress-filled breath, you notice that the body seems to breathe upwards and that there's not much expansion down here, right? So if we want to get the stress away from the neck, breathing still takes some amount of effort. So we need to move the effort in a direction away from the neck. So this is just generally speaking, anything pretty much below the nipple line or below where the ribs come together at the solar plexus. That means you could pay attention to the side ribs and feel some expansion in the side of the ribs, or you can place the hands on the belly or below the belly button and feel some expansion there. Anything basically below the chest level is going to get us what we want for today. Okay? So how do we condition the body to breathe downwards when it's not natural? If your natural breath is breathing up here, okay? So first we need to open up the lungs so that we get different expansions throughout the lungs. So that way, when we're at rest and breathing naturally, there's just generally more space available to us. So we're going to do some segmental breathing and just explore the lungs, okay? So we lean over to one side and you feel the ribs on the side of the body. We're just going to try to open and close these as we breathe in and out, very large breaths as much as possible. For now, we're just stretching, so make the breath as big as possible. And you really need to feel the ribs moving. Let's take that over to the other side. Good, we can scrape inside of the ribs like a rake and try to open up the muscles. Okay, so I'm really trying to dig into the sensitive parts in between the ribs. This might feel a little bit pokey or ticklish. That means you're really doing it right, okay? So that's, if you felt it was hard to feel the ribs expanding, you can just try to mix up all the muscles and loosen the superficial fascia around the sides of the rib cage and try to open up the space this way. This maneuver and this general breathing, lateral rib breathing, is also really important if you're have the type of body that's very narrow, but you have a hugely deep chest. If you seem to be narrower than you are, and you seem to be very front to back with a lot of depth in the rib cage, opening up the side of the ribs is really, really important for trying to get the sternum to come down and create a narrower body, as opposed to being totally puffed out all the time, right? A lot of time that's tension on the side of the ribs. So I just use my fist and kind of rake up and down the sides of the ribs and loosen up all the border of the ribs, right? As I make these circles here, it's kind of touching on the abdomen where the diaphragm can be felt mostly. And coming down around, go into the back a little bit, just at the bottom of the ribs, cleaning out all the border of the ribs. Okay, now we're going to focus on developing flexibility in the stomach. So you're going to lean forward so that the belly becomes very soft, right? And you're going to use the hands in a squeezing, kneading fashion. So again, you put the hands on the waist so the fingers are close to the belly button. You lean forward so they get very slack. And you just start to grip and massage everything in the stomach. Swishing, swirling, gripping, pulling. Anything to make a little bit of space and circulation there. Oh, that was painful. For me, something on the right side of the abdomen is very tight right now. I'm not concerned what it is yet, but I'm just opening up for my lungs right now. Okay, good. Okay, let's repeat our opening experiment, and we'll just baseline take 30 seconds and see if our breathing has changed yet at all, okay? Okay, mine seems to be going generally a little bit more down, but no massive changes yet. Okay, so the next aspect of getting the breathing away from the neck is understanding that we need to use the abdomen as a pump, so that even if the rib cage isn't expanding and contracting all the time, we have this pump underneath that can bellow the lungs up and down for us without the ribs having to constantly open for every inhale and close for every exhale. That breeds tension in the rib muscles, right? If we can let the ribs be soft and just use our pump from underneath, we can breathe basically through the column of ribs and through the neck so that there's very little movement in the ribs and throat, okay? To feel that, we need to be able to get the stomach to come in and out as we breathe. This does require some element of drawing the stomach in, But this isn't the same as like engaging the abs or anything like that. You're simply trying to chase the exhale out with the lower abs. Right? Basically, we know that when we breathe out, the volume in our lungs must decrease to push the air out. Right? And that vacuum, as the lungs empty, needs to be filled by something. It can either be filled by the over-collapsation of the rib cage, leading to a rounded, deflated posture, or it can be filled by the organs rising up into the chest cavity, which is what we want. And that rising happens by letting the abs come in and up as you breathe out. This maneuver can't actually be done without breathing out, because without breathing out, you won't reduce the volume in the lungs. So you'll just try to push the organs up into something that's not emptying, so it's not giving way, right? And then you'll just end up with pressure. Okay, so we don't want that. So we're going to coordinate as we breathe in, the belly's going out. And as we breathe out, the belly comes in and up. Okay, now we're going to enter the real effortlessness part of this session. So we've built the awareness of the lower abs coming in and up, okay, and we're just going to monitor that with the hand for a little bit. And we're going to take a couple of minutes silence breathing here. And what we're going to do is we're going to force ourselves, even if the breath is very shallow, you're moving a very small amount of volume in the lungs, right? We're not exercising, so we're not heaving. But what you need to feel is that the bottom is where the exhale comes from. So that even if you're breathing slightly, you're breathing out. Notice how there's very little movement in my ribs. I'm not allowing the breath to become big enough that I need to recruit extra space. If I breathe in more, now if I want more, I'm out of space, I need to. Right, so we don't want to do that for now. We're going to leave the ribs just relax and exhale. And then we breathe down here. Remember that the amount of air we need in sitting is very little. You may not even need as much breath as I'm demonstrating. Right now I'm not breathing. And again, a little breath. Resting, no air, and breathing at the bottom. This lower abdominal breathing is ideal throughout the day if we can manage to make that habit, or just remember to do it occasionally when we think of it. Not only does it take all of the stress away from our neck and shoulders, but it also creates a constant massage of the organs inside of our abdomen, which is extremely important for digestion and hormone production and proper lymph circulation, basically everything that we want out of our system. Again, focusing on the lower abdominal breathing, we're now going to add in some of our effortless neck movement that we started exploring yesterday. So we'll use a slight turning of the head in the no movement. And again, you're standing in a range where it stays completely comfortable with no tension. In fact, honestly, the smaller the better. You're simply trying to produce neurological input to the neck in a loose fashion, right? So if you turn too far, you can feel tension rack up in the neck. We don't want that. Just easily jostling left to right, swinging with the momentum, okay? While we maintain that, we're going to again start to focus for a few minutes now on the lower abdominal breathing. Even with the lower abdominal breathing, you may be able to feel that as you're turning the head and you breathe in, If you breathe in deeply, you'll notice that it becomes harder to turn the neck. You'll feel slight tension develop in the neck as you breathe in. This is okay, which we're going to try to mitigate by focusing on lower abdominal breathing. But it will be almost impossible to get rid of all of it, because ideally we do want the ribs to move subtly throughout breathing. We don't want them locked in any position. We just want the bulk of the work to happen below the ribs. Okay, so see if we can take a moment of silence here and notice the difference in the quality of neck movement when you're inhaling versus exhaling. As you continue this pattern, you may feel the body wanting to change shapes or shift its posture. This is a good thing. Allow the body to change positions if it means creating less tension. If you're struggling with the lower abdominal breathing, you can also take a look at the pelvic floor muscles, which should be involved in this movement. Squeezing as you breathe out gently, not gripping, but there's some contraction, as if you were going to hold in your urination, just generally speaking, right? We don't need to be so specific. But more importantly, to remember to release these muscles in the pelvis and in the hip joints as you breathe in. This is what makes the space for the air and the lungs and the organs to drop down through the body. As you breathe out, the contraction naturally happens. It's much more important to put the mind's eye into the pelvis and feel a generalized softening of the entire pelvic area as you breathe in. Right? Not only focusing on the pelvic floor, but releasing the hip joints and the hip sockets, which are a little bit farther out than we usually think in the sitting position. This can help free up a lot of space in the abdomen. If you release the hip joints well, you may feel sitting bones or your spine fall a little bit more firmly into the chair that you're sitting in. You're no longer pushing into the ground or lifting yourself up with contraction, just letting the weight settle through the skeleton. Great, now we've invested some time in the lower abdominal breathing, but this is only the beginning of creating really effortless breathing, because the true breathing has to happen in the middle. We do breathe with the lungs and the ribs up top, but we need to try to balance that with the lower abdominal breathing to the point where we get most of the activation in the middle of the body. So if this was lower abdominal breathing was easy for you, you may find that the next step is actually more difficult or feel stressful to you. Whereas if you felt it was difficult to release the lower abs, you might find this section to be a little bit easier, okay? So now we're going to investigate the rib cage. So placing the hands on the lateral ribs, again, we want to keep the activation low in the body. We want the ribs to move up top, but we don't want them to move by suspension of the neck, drawing them upwards. We want them to move by getting the diaphragm to expand the entire rib cage. And simply the volume of air filling us can blow us up like a balloon into rib expansion. But that drive has to come from the lateral ribs and the downward movement of the diaphragm. So we've just worked on the movement of the diaphragm down here. So let's work on it on the movement of the rib cage, okay? So again, as we breathe in, we're going to feel the hands expand to the side. And breathing out, you'll feel them drop back in. This movement should remain subtle right now. If I demonstrate a large movement, it looks cool, but it causes unnecessary tension in my neck, okay? So what you want to feel is just the subtle movement, just like you did in the lower abs. You may not have felt a giant balloon blowing up in the stomach, maybe just some simple in and out movement. We want the same amount of easy, subtle movement in the ribs here. Bring the mind's eye into the connection of the hand against the ribs. You can feel the weight of the arms pressing against the ribs, pushing the air out during the exhale. And you should be able to feel the arms lift slightly by force of the ribs. We're only looking for maybe half an inch to an inch of expansion here. Good, let's add back in our gentle neck movement and see if breathing from the lateral ribs causes the same tension in the neck during inhale versus exhale. Great. Now that we've gained a lot of awareness over our breathing today, you can even hear how my voice has changed over the last few minutes. Right now, it feels it takes a lot less effort for me to produce a nice resonant voice. What I'd like to focus on now is truly integrating this into the subconscious realm. So what we want to do now is try to keep in mind all of the awareness we've just built, which is the movement of the lateral ribs, noticing how that plays little role in the tension of our neck, the downward movement or allowing the belly to relax, and most importantly, the release effect during the exhale, which is that the neck gets soft during every exhale, the ribs come back down, and the stomach comes back in, creating a thin and small body with a relaxed neck at the bottom of every exhale. We also need to pay attention that during the inhale, we release the pelvis to allow air to drop in effortlessly. Focus on the subtlety of the breathing, allowing some expansion in the lateral ribs, some expansion in the lower abs by releasing the pelvis. Now let's marry together the sensation of releasing the pelvis and pelvic floor with the expansion of the lateral ribs. Let's take 10 breaths together, focusing on how the lateral ribs expand while we simply release the pelvis. We no longer need to force the air down. Releasing the pelvis and expanding the lateral ribs will be the only cue that we need for the next 10 minutes, and the only cue that you'll need for the rest of your life in terms of breathing. Okay? So after we built the expansion, let's integrate those together. Releasing the pelvis, feeling expansion in the lateral ribs as we breathe in. And feeling the opposite as we breathe out. The ribs come in and the abdomen comes in. Breathing in, releasing and expanding. Breathing in and elevating the abs. Closing the ribs. Again, you may start to feel the posture shift. This is a good thing. Start to take long breaths as you please while you shimmy the neck left to right, focusing on that single cue, releasing the pelvis and expanding the lateral ribs as you inhale. Follow the easy expansion of the rib cage and abdomen as if you were pushing somebody on a swing set. Notice that as you first take the inhale, the abs, when you release the pelvis, the lungs are very willing to pull the air in like a vacuum. The first part of the inhale comes for free. And we want to gently just follow that through with some slight activation, pulling in more air. And again, as we breathe out, allowing the abdomen to come in and the ribs to close, softening the neck. Releasing to let the vacuum come in. And adding some easy expansion to the end of that effortless pull in. Breathing out, the ribs come in, the abdomen comes up. Again, now releasing the lower abdominal muscles, expanding the ribs. Now that we've gotten the right movement for the breathing, focus on the continuous nature of the breathing. Not holding the breath at the top and not holding the breath at the bottom. You're either expanding or contracting, effortlessly in both directions, but continuously. The rate of filling the lungs slows like a parabolic curve as you get to the top of the inhale. And accelerates as you get to the bottom of the exhale. As the exhale then slows as you get to the bottom of the exhale, and then pulls back in. By using the momentum of the exhale that we've established and the inhale we've established, you can gradually make the breath bigger without affecting the neck. Simply follow the liberated expansion of the rib cage, which is caused by the release of the pelvis. And even if you take a big old deep breath now, this actually can help us release tension from the neck because we've created enough space and awareness lower in the body that we're no longer caught up in the neck. Okay, so let's follow just one or two more easy breaths and notice our baseline experiment where we started with. Okay, we're going to revisit that experiment where we just close our eyes, let the body breathe how it wants, and let's see what feels comfortable now for the body. Notice that even in this small breathing pattern where you're just observing the body, you can still feel all the same awarenesses. Some element of the abdominal region coming up and the ribs closing, and some element of the ribs expanding and the pelvis releasing on each small inhale. Great. I hope you enjoyed the session or got some increased awareness out of it. Okay, always combining that type of breathing down here and down here with the easy neck movement, it's always going to produce a relaxation response in the body, and it's always going to make us feel a little bit better. The more we can keep the breathing down here, the more we can maintain the stretches that we do for the neck. If you find you need to stretch your neck every day to make it feel good, you likely have a problem with the breathing. If you feel like me, you need to stretch the neck nicely, maybe once a week, maybe once every 2 weeks very deeply, then you can bet that the respiratory system is doing a decent job and the neck is just getting tight from working and doing things. But it's not dealing with the chronic stress of lifting the ribs all day. Right? If you feel every day you need to stretch relentlessly to relieve the neck, you can be sure that something's going on in your breathing. And you need to do this work a lot and get used to the pattern and develop the strength and flexibility in the abdomen to be able to get everything nice and low in the body. Okay, thanks everybody for joining us, and we'll see you all tomorrow with another daily session of body tuning. Thanks, Jacqueline, for joining us today.